Welcome back, Focus Learners. Today's explainer is a really fun one, mostly because we're crossing a major threshold. You know, up until now, you might have spent all your time perfectly crafting a single isolated scene, polishing up some clever dialogue, or designing this incredibly fascinating character. But today we transition. We're going to stop thinking about individual scenes and start looking at the big picture, entire stories. The 3-act structure is our storytelling blueprint, and it's exactly how we bring all those brilliant, isolated ideas together into one cohesive, emotionally satisfying journey.
Let's kick things off with a question. Have you ever wondered why all great movies feel so wonderfully familiar? Think about it. Whether you're watching your favorite explosive action blockbuster, a hilarious romantic comedy, or even a gripping real-world documentary, they all share this deeply familiar rhythm. First, you get to comfortably know the world. Then, the problems suddenly get way bigger. And finally, the whole thing reaches this massive dramatic conclusion. That rhythm, beginning, middle, and end, is absolutely no coincidence. It's actually one of the oldest, most reliable storytelling frameworks ever created.
So here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with the storytelling blueprint itself, then break down Act 1, the setup, Act 2, the confrontation, and Act 3, the resolution. After that, we'll look at a story in action and finish up with why these are roadmaps, not rulebooks. All right, let's dive into this.
Section 1. This storytelling blueprint, or organizing your ideas into a clear narrative.
A character, no matter how memorable they are, doesn't just exist in a vacuum, right? They need a complete journey, a defined arc. Without that, they're really just a cool personality standing still in a void. So, the 3-act structure is a storytelling framework that divides a narrative into 3 connected parts: the beginning, the middle, and the end. Now, I know that sounds a bit academic, maybe even a little overly simplistic, but don't let that fool you. Each of these connected parts has a highly specific purpose. This framework isn't here to rigidly dictate what story you have to write. It's a guide to help you organize your ideas so your audience can easily track the characters, understand the conflict, and genuinely feel that meaningful resolution. I actually want you to think of the 3-act structure like climbing a massive mountain. Step 1 is base camp. That's your setup. Step 2 is the ascent, which is the difficult confrontation and the steep climb. And step 3 is the summit and descent, your resolution. The narrative journey literally and emotionally escalates just like a grueling physical climb. You wouldn't just randomly teleport to the top of a mountain. It's the struggle of the climb itself that makes the view from the summit mean something.
Let's break those steps down, starting with Act 1, the setup, where we introduce the character and their ordinary world. Okay, so we're at base camp. This is where we casually meet our main characters, we see their normal daily routines, and we figure out what they actually want out of life. But a story can't just hang out at base camp forever, and that brings us to the inciting incident. This is the sudden catalyst, the event that changes absolutely everything and officially kicks off the real story. It could be an unexpected phone call in the dead of night, a massive storm brewing on the horizon, or even just an important letter in the mail. Whatever it is, this incident is the hard push that abruptly shoves your character out of their comfortable world and forces them onto the mountain path.
Which leads us directly into Act 2, the confrontation, the treacherous slope of escalating stakes.
Act 2 is almost always the longest chunk of your story. Your character is now actively chasing their goal, but they're facing increasingly difficult obstacles. This is that grueling ascent. They hit major roadblocks, they get into arguments, they fail, and every single challenge they face raises the stakes. In this act, mistakes are made and lessons are learned. This is really the beating heart of the emotional and dramatic journey. The tension just keeps rising, and those painful failures are exactly what force your character to actually grow and change.
And that growth is what prepares them for Act 3, the resolution, reaching the peak and returning changed.
Everything collides right here at the summit of our storytelling mountain. This is the climax, the emotional and dramatic peak of the story. This is the moment the character faces their absolute greatest challenge. But just as importantly, it's followed by the consequences of the character's choices. You see, a great story doesn't just end the exact second the bad guy is defeated. We desperately need the descent. Seeing the peaceful aftermath, seeing the new normal, is what gives your audience a vital, deeply satisfying sense of completion.
Now, if all this terminology, inciting incidents, climaxes, setups, starts to feel like a bit too much heavy jargon, don't worry. Our source material gives us this wonderfully simple anchor to remember the flow. Just ask yourself 3 questions. For Act 1, who is the character and what changes in their world? For Act 2, what challenges must they overcome? And for Act 3, how does the journey end and how have they personally changed?
If you can confidently answer those 3 straightforward questions, you can logically guide almost any story smoothly from beginning to end. Section 5. A story in action. Let's see how we apply this framework to a documentary filmmaker. Let's quickly walk through a grounded example. For our Act 1 setup, a young filmmaker discovers his grandfather's traditions are disappearing and decides to document them. It's clean, it's incredibly clear. We easily establish the ordinary world, the family dynamic, and boom, there's our clear inciting incident. The realization that a precious heritage is fading away prompts a concrete decision to act.
But of course, a good story can't be that easy, can it? In our Act 2 confrontation, the grandfather refuses, modernization threatens the village, and time is running out to earn his trust. See how the stakes are beautifully escalating here? The conflict isn't static. It's not just a polite no. Time is a highly pressurized factor, modernization is actively changing things, and the filmmaker is struggling to earn trust. This is the hard, treacherous climb.
And finally, our Act 3 resolution. The grandfather agrees, family stories are preserved, and the documentary bridges generations. We get our climax, that hard-won emotional agreement. And then we get the consequence, the descent from the mountain, bridging the generations. You can clearly see how the story naturally progressed from an introduction right through heavy conflict and finally to a complete emotional resolution.
Which seamlessly brings us to our final section, roadmaps, not rulebooks, avoiding beginner mistakes and staying creative.
Let's look at exactly where a lot of writers get hopelessly stuck. On the left, we have a weak structure. That's a long, drawn-out setup where the conflict takes forever to start, a flat, repetitive middle where absolutely nothing new happens, and an abrupt ending that cuts to black way too quickly. If you've ever watched something and felt totally bored in the middle or cheated at the end, this is why. Now look at the strong story on the right. A crisp setup, constantly escalating conflict, forcing genuine character growth, and a meaningful resolution that actually gives the audience time to breathe and process the journey.
And that brings us to this critical professional insight. The 3-act structure isn't a rulebook, it's a roadmap. Your creativity is what makes the story unique. I absolutely love this thought. You've got to remember that structure is here to support your creativity, not to lock it in a cage. Once you understand this framework, you've got a rock-solid foundation. A lot of the greatest films adapt it, bend it, and even actively challenge it. But they can only do that successfully because they know exactly where those structural load-bearing walls are.
So, I'm going to leave you with a provocative thought. Look at your favorite movies, or even your own unfinished scripts. How will you bend these rules now that you know them? I highly encourage you to watch a film tonight through this entirely new lens. Mentally track the setup, feel that escalating ascent of the middle act, and genuinely savor the resolution. And once you've mastered these broad acts, the natural next step is plotting the specific key moments within them, what the pros call story beats. But, well, we'll have to save that fascinating deep dive for another explainer. Until then, keep learning, keep organizing those brilliant ideas, and keep telling wonderfully structured stories.